Welcome back to Best Friends Forever. On our last episode, you guys met Kim and Claudette. And on this episode, we are going to get deep and talk about motherhood. So I know, Claudette, you have two beautiful daughters. And tell me, how did becoming a mother change your friendship?
If anything, it made it stronger. It solidified my confidence in Kim as a person that I could count on. And it made it really obvious in moments where, you have to make preparations for the future because no one is promised tomorrow. And there are things in life that pop up that could deter your plan, that you have to have things in place. And Kim was my person that was going to be like my designated, stand-in if I wouldn't be here to be present for my daughters. And so having my daughters really also allowed us to bond in a different way because she's their aunt or their titi, as they refer to her. And I get to see all of the things that I love about her. I get to see her share those with my daughters, and they have their own affinity for her. They, in their 25 and 20 now, they each have their own relationship with her. And over the years, if it's even humanly possible for Kim to be physically in the state, because we live in two different states, and we have always, even when we were best friends in second grade, lived in two different states.
Yeah.
But she is always there. She, for the moments that count. And so becoming a mother just really made our friendship stronger, I think.
And then, Kim, tell me, what was it like when your friend, she's getting married, she has a baby, and you got married around the age of 24?
Yes.
Yeah. Claudette was my first real friend that got married, right? And so I often joke with her where I was like, "You were a young mother." She was like, "Do not say that." But she was my first friend that was married, and she was adulting, right? She was married. I met her husband, and her husband was different than any of the other guys she'd ever dated. But when I met him, I literally was like, I know she's going to be okay. And that made me feel good. Like, I remember I had come home because at that time, after college, I still lived in Tennessee. I didn't move back home. And I remember her, and we met at her mom's house in New York. And I remember at that time, Claudette was super, super pregnant with my first niece. And I will always consider, I when I talk about her two daughters, I call them either my niece or my goddaughters, because they're family. And she was pregnant with my first niece, and Claudette's stomach was about out to here. I mean, it was, and when I saw her, I was like, oh my gosh, you were really pregnant. And at the time, to show you growth, and they were still these, we're in our 20s. So her husband had this Lexus coupe. It was black. It was a 2-seater.
Not the coupe.
It was a coupe.
Trying to put a belly in the coupe.
It was a coupe. And I remember, because we'd always been there for each other, he opened the door and I went to help her in, and he was like, "I got this." And I was like, oh, he does. But it's because we had always, you look out for your person. And I still to this day remember that moment where I watched how he cared for her. And at that moment, I was like, she's okay. And I know my niece or nephew, because at that time we didn't know what it was going to be, was going to be okay as well. And so just seeing her navigate being a mother, being a wife, has been an amazing experience for me to see as well. And just to see how many of the things that they did back then, and I'm going to say back then, because weren't things that a lot of us were doing. I remember saying to her, I was like, "You guys are going to music class?" They were like, "Yes. And we're working on sensory and we're doing this." And I was like, wow. I was like, this is a whole other world, so it really opened my eyes, because they were parenting in a different way than what we grew up in terms of parenting, in terms of how they spoke to their girls, in terms of the experiences their girls have had. So it's been amazing to watch. Where I always say, my biggest fear in life would be to raise an ingrate. And I know that does not sound good, but that would be my biggest fear in life.
Yeah.
But when I see their girls, it reminds me that when you pour into children, that's not what your case is. It may be for some people, but when I see them, I have this level of hope where I'm like, we're going to be okay in this world, because they're such they're just amusing, they're funny, they're beautiful, they're smart. And so it makes me see, like, what you pour in is what you get when you see the girls.
And for our friendship, like I said, Kim has always been there in the moments for birthdays or family parties, but even in the moments where there weren't things happening, like scheduled events, she would just come down, or I would go up. And so she has just been it's just been an extension of, it's not a new dynamic in our friendship. I think it's just an extension of what we started in second grade. And we never missed a beat, even though we went to separate colleges and we had to write letters, and she had her own friend group, and her friends have now become my friends. And I don't really have a lot of friends, but because Kim is my friend, but I won't say that. I have some friends, and she does know them, but I'm a lot closer to her friends. She just has great friends, and so for me, that makes me very happy to know that I'm leaving my friend in the hands of really good people also, that are going to watch and guide over her, because I'm protective of her.
And I say good people know good people, so I don't have a problem sharing my friends. But I think the blessing is that's because I've watched my parents have good friends. When I think about my godparents and I think about the friendships that they developed, even now that my parents are both gone, their friends have still made sure that I'm good. They still have, my godmothers have still, reached out, and they're like, are you good? What's going on, baby? I haven't heard from you. It might be a text, but to now, and that's what I know.
Yes.
Seeing that, I know how important that is. So no matter what, I want to be able to, and I've tried to make sure that the girls know that Titi Kim is here. Like, if you tell me something crazy, I am going to tell your mama and daddy. However, I am here. I know you have your aunts, your uncles, and I know you have those people as well, but I want you to know you have someone else in your corner. So that's been important to me as well, so I'm thankful that they've let me be part of their life in that way.
Absolutely. And for my daughters, the example that we set as friends is something that they've carried into their friendships. And my daughters have really great friendships and the really great connections with people that span their, elementary school, middle school, high school now that they're adults, they have adult friends. But I'm proud, and we should take credit for that, because we set a good example of what it means to be friends. And my daughters have those relationships also, which is really nice.
Yes, they're just repeating the cycle.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. So, Claudette, I understand that you had a difficult pregnancy.
Yes.
And so how did Kim show up for you?
Well, I mean, there are so many ways that Kim shows up all the time. So I have epilepsy, and so epilepsy can be, it's different for everyone, and it looks different for most people that are not even familiar with what epilepsy is. And for me, it manifests in different ways at different parts of my life. And during pregnancy, it was very challenging because your hormones are off balance. And so one of the triggers for seizures can be a hormonal imbalance, amongst other things. But there were moments where, Kim would just come to Philadelphia and be an extra set of hands, and she may not have known that I needed her to be that extra set of hands. I don't always tell her if I've had a seizure, but she knows.
I know.
And I often don't like to talk on the phone after, because some of my words might be slurred, or my brain might be moving a little bit slower, and I might have a headache. But I will always answer when she calls, and sometimes I can't verbalize, and she gets it and she understands. And so she's always been, even in the moments where I feel like I need to push to keep going, she is my voice of reason that says, it's okay to slow down. It's okay to not do it, and to take care of you. And that's, you kind of lose that with being busy with life and family and raising kids, that you are a person yourself and you need to take a break. And it's easy to give someone else that advice, but to receive it is, invaluable. And so Kim has always been that for me.
Yeah. And Claudette is that for me. The last few years have been difficult, right? For me, in terms of when we talk about family, talk about children, I went through IVF by myself. I decided that I wanted to become a mom. And so I become pregnant, but I had a miscarriage. But along with that, my parents have been sick, right? And they're now deceased. But throughout every component of each of those experiences, Claudette's been there. She's been my person who understood when I was just like, I'm about going crazy right now. Where we talk about those letters or the card, I might just get a card in the mail where it's like, just breathe. Like, you're doing the best that you can, just breathe. Being an entrepreneur, like taking that leap, Claudette, so you talk about cheerleaders, but then you also talk about my consigliere, right? Who really gets me and wants the best for me, right? And even things that I don't know about me, or when I'm unsure about me,
Because I'm sure she's magic, and I know this, and so
Black girl magic.
sorry,
it's okay.
But I think it's understanding all those. Oh, sorry. I think it's like understanding all those different parts of who you are, and like, it's not always pretty. Like, friendship's not always going and being like how it was when we were younger, when it was, we're going to the club, yes. Right? Now it's juggling life, because life be life and hard, and what does that look like? Yes. It's the person who, when my mom was sick and my mom had just had her stroke, Claudette came to visit her. And I remember seeing my mom light up, and my dad. It's something I will never forget.
I need one of those syrups.
Or when my dad got sick and Claudette couldn't physically be here, but her mom came. When my dad was in hospice, Claudette's mom came, and she gave me the hug that I needed from a mom. So it's those parts of life.
Yes.
It's those parts of life.
And in life you have like a romantic partner, and then you have, if you're lucky, you'll have a romantic partner that you share your life with. That's the hope. But before all of that, is the relationships that you build with family, whether you're fortunate to have siblings, that's like your foundation, and that's what grounds you. And Kim is one of those grounding relationships for me that goes back to before I even know who I was as a person, before I even knew what I wanted out of life, and before I could even like envision where I wanted to go. She has always been with me, supporting me, loving me, being a friend, being somebody that I could, just be my whole true self with. And so, I can't imagine life without my best friend, even if we live in different cities.
Yeah.
There have been moments where I have not been well, and Kim has come and she's made me soup, and like cooked for my family. And when my youngest was going on the prom, I couldn't physically take her to go get this dress. And I knew that she was going to be disappointed, but I knew that Kim would be just as good as, if I was there. And she was going to, ask some of the hard questions and probably even be a little sterner than we were on the dress. Because,
she was not going to get the church split.
She was not going to get the church split. And because when I saw the back of the dress, I said, did you clear this with your mother? And I took pictures too. Like, I took pictures and I was like, this is where it's hitting. Is this okay? Or do we need to pull this up here? And I know the seamstress at the time was looking at me like, who are you? And I was just like, I'm Titi Kim.
Exactly.
I'm Titi Kim.
And we all know you prom is like that moment, you
Yeah.
you want everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I felt bad as a mom that I could not physically go and be there, but I knew that Kim had me.
She
I
was
had no worries.
Yeah.
And they took care of the dress and everything was fine. And, I didn't have to deal with like a pouty 17-year-old with attitude, because I, reneged on being able to go and, be part of this moment because Kim was able to stand there and do it for me. And that is, that's amazing, to just even be able to ask someone and then they actually follow through. And Kim has always been that. If we always had like house parties for the girls, and Kim would come early and she'd decorate, and then she'd be like the wrangler for the kids that were out of control. And at some point the volume of the party would be going up a little higher, and we'd be like, "What's going on?" And it'd be Kim over dancing with the kids and singing and hyping the people up, and it was like, "Oh, okay, everything is fine." And everyone in my family, whether it's my birth family or my extended married love family, everybody knows that, and everybody knows Kim.
I know her husband's family too.
Everybody knows Kim.
Your cousin Kim.
I am. Like her niece calls me Titi Kim.
Yes.
Like
Wow.
her niece from her husband's brother. His daughter calls me Titi Kim.
Wow.
And at one point when my first daughter was born, Kim was with us like every weekend.
I was.
And so to the point where people were like, "Do you live here now?"
I would.
Yes.
Yes. Unofficially. I mean, and to the point where they both were like, if you move to Philly, like maybe we should look at apartments because you can live. And at the time I was going through a transition in life, right? Where I had just moved back from Tennessee. I was trying to figure out my career. I was in finance at the time, but I hated it. I was good at it, but I hated it. And I was living back at home with my parents. And so as someone who you had your own apartment, your own career, and now you're living with your parents again, and to have somebody who, and my parents were great, but to have someone say, "Where you going? What time you going to be home? Who you with?" You're like, I'm a grown woman. So when I would go to Philly, it was like a respite. Like I remember we would put Samia in the car seat and we would roll, and Samia would call Barnes and Noble's the library because she was an avid reader, or we might go to the grocery store. I would sit in their house in my bonnet, and her husband would look at me like, "For real?"
She's real comfortable.
Like she's real comfortable. And I was like, "He's not my husband. I don't care." I would literally be in their house. I would get dressed. And then I was like, I got to preserve my hair. And at the time, I used to wear a lot of weave. Mm-hmm. So I would have like my 16-inch bust down weave. And I would have it wrapped in my bonnet. And then he would just look at me and be like, "But why?" And I was like, "Because I'm in the house. I don't need to have my hair done."
But there are very few people that could like come and be at our house and he'd be okay with it for extended periods. Kim is all right.
So Kim, it sounds like you were just not even an extended member of the family. You are the family. And remind me, I know in a previous conversation you talked about how no one could hold the baby except for Kim.
Oh, yes. So, as a new mom, you're like nervous about germs. And so our wedding reception, we had at outdoor event, and there were a lot of people, and I was a protective new mother. And so I was very, very unsure about letting people like hold the baby, pass the baby through the crowd. And so, there were some people that had come to the reception and just really were seeing the baby for the first time. And of course they were excited. And so, yes, you can be excited to see the baby, but you cannot hold the baby. But as soon as Kim came, she got the baby. And so everyone that didn't know her was like, "Well, who is she? Why did she get to hold the baby?" And
no, because she's my niece. Because she is my niece. Because she is my niece. That's why. Because I'm holding my niece.
Yes.
Right. Just stirring the pot.
Yes.
I am.
Yes. Yes.
Because I'm holding my niece. That's why. And I don't know you. And my hands are clean. I wash my hands to hold this baby. Okay? I have behavior.
Gotta wash your hair.
Gotta wash your hair.
But I think at that moment, most people that didn't really know our connection then really fully understood that, yeah, this is serious.
This is deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It runs deep.
Kim, how would you describe Claudette as a mother?
I think she's an amazing mother, and it's not all hype. Not just because she's my bestie, but I think she's a really good mother. Like, I love how you talk to the girls, but she still can be very stern, where it's like, oh, I felt that, and she didn't even have to raise her voice. Where I'm like, oh. And it's interesting seeing how two children come from the same parents but have completely different personalities, and how she's able to parent to both of their needs. So that's one of the things I think as a mother, I think she's great but I think at times I'm like, girl, you taking that on too? Like, like, okay, Superwoman. Like, I'll just send her memes where it's like Superwoman, where it's like with a cape. Cause I'm like, girl, I need you to take a beat. Cause that's a lot. That's a lot. But I think she gives so much. She pours so much into the girls that I love seeing it, because that's why they are strong, confident young ladies, right? Because they have an example.
Thank you, friend.
And
Claudette, if you were to look back when you were a child, what would your younger self say about you being a mom, the kind of mother that you are today?
Wow. My younger self would probably say that I'm kind of cool, but very, very firm. Also, I try to be pragmatic, and I try to be mindful of what it feels like to be the age of the daughter in that moment. So, a lot of times people are like, oh, teenagers are terrible, or, all these things. But I think I really worked on trying to focus on all the needs that I needed in those years that where things were falling short. And I tried to step in and do it differently for them. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. No, that was good.
That's good. Yeah. I felt myself going on a tangent.
And then your relationship with your nieces, how would you describe that? I'm sure you all like share everything, and
it's interesting because I think the funniest way to explain it is, I will, especially my youngest niece, she's in college right now. So one of the things that I've tried to do is I'll try to give her like a pop-up phone call or a pop-up text when she least expects it. But the funny thing is, there have been times when I have given her a pop-up phone call, but I haven't spoken to Claudette. And she was like, and then I'll talk to her afterwards. I was like, oh, hey, I just talked to her. And she'll say to me, she's going to think that I told you to call her because I spoke with her earlier. And I was like, I didn't realize it. I was like,
all on the same day.
We'll call on the same time, within like an hour or so, which is really funny. So I think for the girls, now it's great because we're learning a different relationship. My older niece, I call her about for professional things. Like professionally, she designed my website. When I've had questions in terms of social media, she's younger. I've literally said to her, look through this, tell me what you think. I need a critical eye. So it's great being able to now, I'm older, but you can always learn something. So it's great now being able to experience them as young adults, right? So I look at this older young lady and I see her now navigating a relationship, and it makes my heart smile because I see her partner and I'm like, he's a good egg. He's a good kid. Like I met him and I was like, right? And she's looking at me like, you're so embarrassing. Like,
well, yes, I was going to ask, like, do you give dating advice?
I do not.
I do
not. But what I try to do is I try to give like on the sly advice. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't feel so auntie-ish.
Yeah.
But I also I like the respect, right? Yeah. I'm not your friend. I ain't one of your little friends. I'm not one of your little friends. But I respect you.
Yeah.
So I think what I appreciate is now as they've gotten older, me now having a different level of relationship with them as they've gotten older.
And they know that she loves them and she's their cheerleader. And she shows them by like being present in the important moments, but she also like does random calls or sends cards or, or when she sees them, even if it is, just for a second, she makes them feel like it is all about them. And so, that's wonderful. And I couldn't, I couldn't have asked for a better, aunt, godmother for my children.
One of the best things about having a best friend is that sometimes you have a shoulder to lean on and sometimes to cry on. On our next episode, Kim and Claudette share how their friendship got them through the loss of a loved one.
When you talk about a shoulder, she's been more of a shoulder. She's been a foundation. She's been a support.